Electrical Charge, the Unified Field Theory, and the Roche Limit by Miles Mathis. Welcome to today's explainer. We've got a fascinating journey ahead with 5 main stops. First, the alien physicist. Second, redefining electrical charge. Third, the hidden unified field. Fourth, debunking the Roche limit. And finally, number 5, a new cosmic balance. Let's get right to it. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, the alien physicist. To really grasp the author's fundamental critique of standard abstract physics, we need to look at a standard textbook footnote about the electric field. This footnote literally claims that whether the field is, quote, real or not is just a philosophical or even metaphysical question. Well, the author, Miles Mathis, argues impartially that this is a deliberate misdirection. He asserts that transmitting a physical force from one object to another, that is strictly a mechanical issue, not a metaphysical one. According to the source, early scientists, think Michael Faraday, they created these necessary heuristic devices, right? Like drawing pencil lines to represent an electric field. But standard physics ultimately failed to give those abstract lines any underlying physical reality or strict mechanical definition. The argument here is that modern physics has grown way too comfortable with just giving descriptions rather than providing true mechanical explanations. And this brings us to a really brilliant thought experiment. The source asks, what if a perfectly logical alien arrived here on Earth, downloaded all the standard textbooks from the Library of Congress, and just tried to understand human physics mechanically? According to the author, this alien would be absolutely baffled by our foundational math. I mean, think about it. When digging into the standard fundamental unit of electrical charge, stuff like the ampere and the coulomb, the alien would find 3 different abstract constants inexplicably stacked on top of each other. You've got the electrostatic constant, the permittivity of free space, and the permeability of vacuum. The source argues that stacking these constants obscures a glaring fact. In our standard SI system, electrical charge is actually left mechanically undefined. Our alien friend would discover that we've confusingly assigned characteristics like permittivity to the vacuum of space itself. But wait, space is literally supposed to be nothingness, right? Instead of assigning tangible physical parameters to actual matter, we're assigning them to a vacuum. It's like a giant puzzle with missing pieces. Section 2, redefining electrical charge. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the direct contrast we're seeing. On the left side, you've got the standard model. This model treats charge as a fundamental dimensionless property. It's kind of like a nebulous cloud or an intrinsic quality that's just assigned to particles, completely without any physical mechanics to back it up. But then on the right, take a look at the Mathis model. The source actually performs a strict dimensional analysis on older physics systems, specifically the stat coulomb from the old CGS system. And through this math, he demonstrates that charge actually resolves mathematically to the exact same dimensions as mass. Let that sink in. So by bypassing all those abstract constants entirely, the source concludes that charge is mathematically, and therefore mechanically, perfectly equivalent to mass. It's not just some abstract ghost-like quality, it actually has real physical substance. Relying heavily on that dimensional math, the author proposes a very strict literal definition. Charge, in this view, is simply the summed mass or the momentum of ejected subparticles that form a bombarding gas. Okay, so in this framework, fundamental particles, like protons and electrons, they don't just magically have an inherent quality called charge. Instead, think of them as constantly radiating real physical subparticles out into space. The total mass and the outward momentum of that radiating gas, that is the charge. So when 2 particles repel each other, the source asserts it has absolutely nothing to do with invisible field lines or spooky action at a distance. Rather, they are quite literally, physically bombarding each other with this dense radiated gas. By assigning real mass to this radiation, the author claims we can just toss out those abstract constants entirely. We can explain electrical repulsion purely through physical mechanical collisions happening right there on the microscopic level. Section 3, the hidden unified field. Notice the breakdown of forces here between these 2 models. The source is asserting something truly radical, that Isaac Newton's famous gravity equation already contains a hidden unified field. Now, traditionally, Newton's standard equation is viewed as calculating a solo pulling force of gravity, right? An abstract attraction at a distance. But Mathis argues that if charge fundamentally has mass, and all macroscopic objects are constantly radiating this bombarding gas we just talked about, well then macro bodies, like giant planets, they must be emitting it on a massive scale too. Therefore, that singular force we measure and call gravity is actually a compound number. It's a resultant force of 2 totally separate, competing mechanical interactions. As you can see outlined here, Mathis mathematically separates Newton's classic equation into 2 distinct parts, a purely gravitational field and a massive opposing electromagnetic, or E/M, field that is actively pushing back against it. Let's outline exactly what these 2 opposing mechanical forces are in this alternative unified model. First up, we have gravitational expansion. To completely dispense with that spooky action at a distance of an invisible pulling force, the source actually takes Albert Einstein's principle of equivalence entirely literally. It frames gravity as a real physical acceleration outward. That means all objects are physically expanding in size, which creates the apparent pull of gravity as their surfaces actually rush toward each other. Wild, right? But balancing this out is the second massive force, electromagnetic bombardment. This is the macro version of that physical charge field we just discussed. Those radiating subparticles from the expanding planetary objects, they are constantly pushing against each other, creating intense repulsion. So any planetary orbit, or even the measured weight of an object on a scale, is simply the vector addition of these two mechanical interactions, the apparent pull of physical expansion minus the actual physical push of the EM radiation. Section 4. Debunking the Roche limit. To really grasp how this unified field changes celestial mechanics, we've got to look at some glaring anomalies right in our own cosmic backyard. Traditional astrophysics relies heavily on something called the Roche limit. This is supposed to be the strict mathematical distance at which a celestial body, held together only by its own gravity, will get completely torn apart by the tidal gravitational forces of a much larger primary body. It's a foundational concept, but the source asks a really critical empirical question here. If this mathematical Roche limit is definitively correct, then why on earth do certain fragile moons currently orbiting Jupiter and Saturn completely defy it? It's a real puzzle. And this brilliantly illustrates the structural anomalies of the moons Pan and Metis. Take a look at the breakdown here, and notice just how profound these anomalies are. Both of these moons orbit well inside their respective planets' established Roche limits, so according to standard gravitational tidal models, they should literally be ripped to absolute shreds. Now, the mainstream explanations for their highly improbable survival usually rely on them having extremely high tensile strength to somehow resist that crushing gravity. Yet, observational data directly contradicts this. Metis, for instance, is believed to be made entirely of porous ice with incredibly low tensile strength. It's super fragile. And Pan, orbiting Saturn, has an overall density lower than standard quark. In fact, it's actually accreting material, meaning it is steadily gathering matter rather than being torn apart by the giant planet. The source argues that these glaring physical anomalies entirely disprove the standard gravitational tidal model. He suggests the historical math, which was initially established way back in 1848, is fundamentally flawed because it relies on pulling forces that simply do not match our actual physical observations. So, to reconcile this massive contradiction, the source proposes a completely new limit based squarely on the unified field. As highlighted here, the standard Roche limit assumes the inevitable destruction of a satellite by a tidal gravitational pull. The proposed Mathis EM limit, however, defines the limit instead as a specific, calculable distance where the massive charge field repulsion of the two orbiting bodies perfectly balances the gravitational pseudo-attraction of their expansion. So according to the author, fragile moons like Pan and Metis aren't destroyed simply because gravity isn't actually tearing at them. Instead, they are held safely in place by a dense cosmic cushion. Very small, low-density bodies can exist in these super low orbits because they are small enough to effectively funnel the primary giant planet's dense charge field right around them. They easily avoid the full, brutal force of the mechanical repulsion that would normally bounce a much larger body away. Section 5. A new cosmic balance. This radical concept of enormous celestial bodies safely bouncing off charge fields leads us to applying this whole mechanical paradigm shift to the grand history of our solar system. We currently know that Jupiter and Saturn exist in a specific orbital resonance, right? They're slowly drifting apart over millions of years. Traditional gravity-only models really deeply struggle to explain why they didn't just collide in the distant past, since standard gravity theoretically increases exponentially as distance decreases. But by using his new unified field equations, the source outlines a fascinating, purely mechanical historical event in 3 distinct steps. First, millions of years ago, Jupiter and Saturn made an incredibly close approach in the early solar system. The author specifically calculates this near miss at a staggering 18,110 kilometers. That is practically scraping paint in cosmic terms. Second, at this insanely close distance, the massive EM charge fields of both gigantic, radiating planets sharply increased due to the proximity, essentially acting like a colossal physical bumper. Third, unable to overcome the immense mechanical repulsion of their bombarding radiation fields, the gas giants literally bounced apart. They eventually settled into the exact orbital resonance we observe today. The source even suggests that the iconic rings and highly fractured moons of these planets are the direct, lingering physical evidence of the sheer violence of this near collision and subsequent bounce. It is undoubtedly an incredible alternate view of celestial history and standard physics. The source presents an entire universe that isn't built on abstract mathematical forces or metaphysical field lines. No, it's built on tangible physical mechanics spanning all the way from the tiniest bombarding subparticles up to the grandest bouncing gas giants. So think about this. If this completely physical model holds true, if gravity and electromagnetism are truly just two sides of the very same mechanical coin, engaged in a constant, measurable tug of war across space, how much of our standard, textbook universe is waiting to be entirely rediscovered? Thank you for listening to another session of the Notebook LM News series. You can find the full archive of all my podcasts at notebooklm.news.